Did you know when the first podcast has been recorded? It was back in 2004 when the first podcast was launched. And in 2005, George Bush became the first president to actually have his podcast launched in back in 2005. And in 2006, Steve Jobs showed how to create a podcast on iTunes. And in 2011, Apple shared that there are 1 billion subscribers for podcasting. And in 2019, it was statistically shown as 165 million people around the world are listening to podcasts every single month. So, what's in it for us? That might be a great question, isn't it? So, today I wanted to tell you about podcasting and how we can leverage podcasting to learn and share. It was back in 2018 when I started listening to podcasts. And when I started with one podcast called Indie Hackers, it is for entrepreneurs who are creating businesses online. It was so fascinating for me to learn from their stories how they got started without knowing how to create one. And for some of us who are listening to these stories might be thinking, hey, I can be one who can build a business online. For me, it was about the learning experience because I always love to learn about different things, different areas. And now I started stumbling upon other podcasts which I started listening to. The other one is Humans 2.0. Humans 2.0 is about mental health, is to understand what you need to do as a person in order to really leverage the tools to your advantage. And there was Y Combinator, there is a lot of great podcasts that over the years that I started listening to. I think one of the key benefits of just listening to podcasts, I always felt that, hey, it was almost like they're teaching me. They're sharing their stories, how they got started, and I started believing in myself because most of them are real stories, right? So they're sharing their stories, their journeys, how they got started, how they failed. And over a period of time, I started seeing trends. Hey, these are just people like you and me who are doing great things because they're so passionate about what they're doing. And back in 2019, I thought, hey, why don't I create a podcast to share my story and other stories whom I just love sharing? And I started thinking and thinking. So a lot of times what happens, we have an idea, we think over it, not taking the action, right? Because there might not be the time. But again, in 2020, after pandemic, I got this new opportunity. Hey, this is the time to really start something new that I'm super passionate about. I'm passionate about storytelling and sharing people's journeys to others so that we all can learn from their failures and do what best we can in our life and career. So I started thinking, hey, what do I need to do in order to create a podcast? We have an interviewer, that's me, and we have a tool that needs for hosting, and I need guests. Now, the question is, who are my guests? And what is the name of the podcast? Right? Now I started thinking, hey, you know what? I'm a two-time graduate at the University of Memphis, and I'm going to create a podcast by the name Driven by Doing, right? That's exactly what I wanted to show to all the people that if you keep doing things that you love, you're going to create amazing things. So I started the niche area where I wanted to interview professionals who are just like you and me, and even students who are doing wonderful things while in college, getting out of college, especially because during pandemic, a lot of students are getting out of college, not really knowing what to do because times have changed in just last 6 months. And I wanted to bring those stories to people and share their journeys, how they are doing amazing things. Now, I created this podcast called Driven by Doing, and I started interviewing guests who were just in my circles. And one tool that I leveraged to my advantage is LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is a great place. And sometimes it can be overwhelming because there's a lot of things that you can do. But always think that how can I start small? What is the thing that I can do today to go to that next step, to get to my next goal? Irrespective of what career that you're doing, whether you're a business person, whether you're a realtor, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a professor. So there are a lot of people who are exactly doing the same thing that you guys are doing. Now you need to create a community of people that think like you and want to do the same things like you. When you create that atmosphere, that's when miracles happen. So I started interviewing my first guest, who's a who's in my network here in Memphis. And I started sharing stories here in Memphis, and I started realizing, wow, like people have these amazing stories just in my own circle. And I started asking them to introduce me to their friends, to share their stories. And I started sharing these stories on my LinkedIn. And I started connecting with people who said, hey, I think you're doing an awesome job. Can I be a guest on your podcast? Wow, I started seeing something different, right? People are now approaching me to be a guest on my podcast. How cool is that, right? I have a person that I interviewed yesterday. He's an entrepreneur in California. Last month, I interviewed somebody in New Zealand who's an entrepreneur doing amazing things. And in India and in UK, like now I've almost done like around 35 interviews from people all around the world, listening to their stories and sharing their stories. And I keep getting these messages saying that, hey, wow, this is amazing. You're just sharing the simple stories. Because what I started realizing is that we all love stories, isn't it? What's there in a story, right? There is this character, there is this challenge, there is this choice that people make, and there is this change. That's storytelling, right? So create a podcast and share the stories that you love. Thank you so much.